All right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben the Jet Rets. Ben, it's football season. It starts tomorrow. How are you feeling, brother?
I'm so excited, dude. I'm ready.
I know, me too, dude. It's fun times, best time of the year when football gets going.
Yes.
So it's preseason tomorrow, like I just mentioned. But one thing we're gonna do, because for those who are our OGs who were here at the very first episode, we kind of did this all in one last year, but we thought instead of doing a behind the back prediction pod for all the teams, we're going to go conference by conference over these next few weeks, and decide who's going to win divisions, who's going to make it to the playoffs, do our early predictions, and see how wrong we are this time. And again, you never know what's going to happen. The Bengals, making it to the Super Bowl last year in the AFC, and injuries happen, and that's life. So, how you feeling about your predictions this year, buddy? You feeling good?
I was half right. I guess maybe a quarter right about my prediction last year. I knew that the Niners would get to the bowl, but I also thought they'd win. And here we are. So I'm feeling good. I'm ready.
Hell yeah. Okay, so let's start. We're going to start with the AFC on this episode. So, the AFC freaking gauntlet, it's going to be all over the place. I'm excited to hear your takes on who you think is where and who is in your playoff spots. So, I'll start off here. We're going to start with the AFC West. It's probably arguably the easiest division to talk about in this exercise here. So, when we're looking at the betting odds here from DraftKings Sportsbook, we look at the favorites, which are the Kansas City Chiefs at minus 230, pretty obviously, of course. And then I don't know if this shocks you or not, but then they have the LA Chargers at plus 320, then the Las Vegas Raiders at plus 900, and the Denver Broncos at plus 1800. So when I look at this, let's just start with who each of us have as the division winners. And I think both of us are going to say the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah,
But
it's the Chiefs.
it's the Chiefs. So I had them on with a 13-4 record, and I don't know what you had for yours.
So I actually have them at 11-6.
Okay.
And there's reasons for that, but I'll let you keep going here.
So I think 13-4 only because last year they did finish 11-6, and the offense was plagued with drops and all seeming out of sorts and all this stuff. And I know defensively this year they lost L'Jarius Sneed, but they still have, oh man, what's his name? Trent McDuffie. They still have a bunch of pieces around. Chris Jones still there. I'm not really worried about them. And I think last year's regular season kind of funk that they had, I think it's going to be ironed out with some of these new additions that they've made. And they're definitely looking to change up their identity. They're providing more deep threats to hopefully take a little bit of pressure off of Mahomes. So hopefully Xavier Worthy works out. Marquise Brown, I believe, is who they have as well. So they're trying to get speedier, faster, and I think it'll benefit them. And I also think the rest of the division just isn't going to, as usual, isn't going to pose a problem for them. And I don't know how you feel before we get into the 2, 3, and 4 of it. What are you thinking 11-6 for the Chiefs?
So I mean, they're coming off their back-to-back Super Bowl wins, and I mean, there's something about the Chiefs in the regular season, like it's not that they don't take it seriously, it's just not it's not the hottest thing for them, not like it is for every other team in the NFL. Patty and the rest of those boys know, like, if they make it to the playoffs, that's all they need. They can get in as the worst seed there, and they've still got probably better chance than most teams in the AFC to get to the bowl. So I look at that, and I look at the history of them in the regular season, and I'm like, I don't see them dominating the AFC this year, and really taking off and even, in my opinion, getting a first place in the AFC and getting a bye in that first week. But I'm looking at, like, especially the addition of Xavier Worthy. He's a great player. He's essentially the new Tyreek Hill, right? But
Right.
the problem with him, in my opinion, is I think that there's a lot of growth that needs to happen with him as a player still. He's got a lot to learn. He's got a lot of development to get under. Like, he could have fallen farther than he did. Like, I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the development for him. I'm thinking that it's going to take time for him to really get introduced into the offense. Losing Sneed, I think, is actually a bigger hit than people realize. I think that he was a major part of that team and someone that Patty could rely on. Probably the second option over probably anybody else, because I think that you're adding another year on to Kelsey too. Like, Kelsey's only getting older, and only a couple hits away from what could be multiple games, out. And obviously we make these predictions and we might be taking into account some injuries, but the 11-6 for me with the Chiefs, like, it doesn't account for the injuries. It just accounts for, I don't think they got better. I think they got worse on defense. I don't think they got better on offense. I think that they're not the same team that was in the bowl last year, but that doesn't change what I think the damage they could do in the playoffs. Like, I still think they could make a run if they wanted to.
Right, and I do think another part to, like, year 11-6, in theory, that would still most likely win them the division anyway.
Mhm.
So I do think that, I think for me, it's like the 13-4 of it all. I semi disagree with the whole their offense didn't get any better because the receiving core got a little bit better. I mean, hypothetically,
Mhm.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling was having trouble with jobs. Whatever they were dealing with, they had a lot of drops. And I just think with Rashee Rice coming in, obviously he had the whole offseason trouble. They're trying to brush under the rug, but he's still a really good player and he's coming into his own, and him and Mahomes are getting that connection. And I do think that having him be the over the middle of the field, short reception kind of guy, him and Kelsey, and then having those explosive guys to kind of break open the offense with Pacheco, I still see them as being, I think they're going to improve based off of how they played last year, because last year they played pretty bad on offense. They were struggling to score in the second half. I think that those issues are going to be ironed out a little bit more, and they're going to be more consistent, I guess. I wouldn't say like a lot better, but I think that level of consistency will save them those 2 or 3 games that they lost last year that they shouldn't have.
I do agree with the consistency standpoint, because you look at how many you talked about. You look at how many drops they had throughout the entire season. They led the league in drops, and a lot of those were wide open touchdowns to win like 3 or 4 different games. Like, it was at the end of games that some of the biggest drops happened for them. And so, for me, like, I look at what they were lacking last year, and yes, I agree they're probably going to be more consistent, but they really leaned on that defense last year, especially in the games where they couldn't get the scoring going in the second half. And that's something I don't know if you can still rely on that defense this season with how much more aggressive offensively the rest of the AFC has gotten. So it's kind of up in the air. It's going to be interesting. We're going to have to see how the defense, plays out in the first few weeks, because that's going to be, if Patrick's never had a defense up until last year, really, that he could really rely on to win games. And he had that last year. And the Chiefs were like, well, we still won the Super Bowl. And so now he's running back with almost the same team, but in some ways worse, but in other ways more consistent, kind of like what you spoke to. So it's going to be interesting. I think that, yeah, they run the division, no problem. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting with all those other AFC, offensive heads out there.
Yeah, the AFC is definitely a gauntlet this year. So let's break down the rest of the division, what we have. I'll just go through my 2, 3, 4 real quick, and then you'll do your 2, 3, 4, and we'll see where we differ here. So I had the Raiders finishing second in the division with an 8-9 record, and then I had the Chargers, and I feel like I'm lowballing them a lot, like on this one, and we'll talk about that in a second here. But I have the Chargers in third with a 5-12 record, and part of this exercise is when we went on Pro Football Network's playoff prediction tool that they had, and we were messing around with a lot of these records to kind of let you go week by week, pick every game. And like, I just couldn't see myself picking the Chargers in a lot of these games, even though they do have one of the easiest schedules in the league. But I have them at third at 5-12, and then Denver on last in the conference or in the division at 4-13. I don't think they're going to be good. What about you?
I think you're disrespecting the Chargers.
I know. I felt that.
I'm looking at this team, man, and this is a completely new team, completely new organization now. Like, the moves that they made in the front office and the coaching is, honestly, it's going to save Justin Herbert's career. And I'm not kidding. That's not an overstatement.
No, I don't think so.
they got a lot better this offseason. Adding Harbaugh was major. Their O-line has improved. They've got depth at the wide receiver position now. They've improved the running back situation. Like there's they've retained multiple defensive stars this offseason. Like they're and they have the second easiest schedule in the NFL in terms of you know the power ranking or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's I'm just looking at that Chargers team, man, and I'm wondering how you could. What was the record you had for them?
5-12. Yeah.
I have 11-6, which is the same record of the Chiefs, but losing the tiebreaker.
Wow. See,
But
so yeah, we're on opposite.
it banks on they have to start the season hot. They have to come out of the gates relatively hot because, and look, there's going to be an adjustment period, but you can win through adjustment periods, and that's going to be key to this. Is can they win throughout their adjustment period while they get all these new, this whole new situation actually put in place and working? Can you win throughout that? And then get to the midseason point, get to your bye week, and then come right back out of it and keep rolling. Like that's going to be the key.
So I think for me, and again, Jim Harbaugh throughout his entirety of the time with the Niners never had a losing season. So his NFL career is very good. And he just come off of winning a freaking national championship in Michigan and being a stud. I definitely buy into the fact that his coaching is going to make a difference, but I do think that there are holes in the spots where the roster is weakest is number one, they do get hurt a lot. And yes, they kept Khalil and Bosa, but I doubt they're going to last even half of the games this year. That's just their track record has shown otherwise. I think their linebacker situation is struggling. I think the interior of their offensive line hasn't gotten better. And I think that with Jim Harbaugh's style of ground and pound, he's going to, we chip away and help Herbert by having a more balanced game is you can't really, he likes to go right up the middle. You're not going to be able to attack that way when the front of it. Like, I know they drafted Joe Alt, but that's also another thing. Like, how often do rookie tackles, how awesome are they right out of the gate without a little bit of a learning curve too? And then you lose Keenan Allen, you lose Mike Williams, you're going with a, new receiving core that, could, maybe be good, or, they're still work in progress. And they had the running back group, I believe it's Gus Edwards now and the guy from the Ravens. And so I just don't know how much better offensively they got. And I also don't know if their defense is going to be able to hold up enough to hold them together throughout the entirety of the season. And I also don't think that for them, like, I think that, yes, the goal is to ultimately compete, but I think this is the first time for John Harbaugh or for Jim Harbaugh that he has a little bit of leeway to not be great, to not have to go to the Super Bowl this year. Like, this is a rebuilding team not rebuilding. They're a team that's trying to retool quick, and they can take a few lumps this season in order to get better next season because they're going to open up the cap space and all of this stuff. Like, they're in position to be really good in the future. I don't buy that they're going to be that legit this year. That's just me. So, I know 5-12 was like, I feel like I'm lowballing. Like, I see them, if I'm being honest, I see them more as like the 8-9 record, like the Raiders. But I ran into a few games where I'm just like, they're running into some of these good defenses in a few of these games that I just think that the offense might struggle more than we think. Herbert has yet to show, and maybe maybe Harbaugh might help, but Herbert he was awesome his rookie year, and he's been exactly the same. Like, that's all he's done. And he hasn't had any level of playoff success. He's only been in one playoff game, and that was the huge overtime, the huge comeback loss that they shouldn't have suffered against Jacksonville. But I think this is a good year for the Chargers in the sense that their expectations are almost as low as they can get in terms of where everyone else expects them to be and where they want them to be. Nobody thinks the Chargers are winning the Super Bowl this year, but that's my Chargers take in that sense, because it was hard putting them. I think the Raiders are a deeper team than the Chargers, even though the Chargers have the better quarterback and probably the better coach. But I think the Raiders have a better defense, especially with the vibes of Antonio Pierce. He seems to vibe with those guys. And even with Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, they'll be able to elevate them better than Jimmy Garoppolo did in his time there. So, yeah.
I think that there's in the first 10 weeks, they play really 3 or 4 tough games.
Mm-hmm.
Like against playoff teams, like what you would what you know to be playoff teams year in and year out. And so I'm looking at the other teams that they're playing, specifically like opening up against the Raiders and then playing the Panthers and then the Steelers. Then they play the Chiefs. Like then they roll into the Broncos, the Cardinals, the Saints, and then they see the Browns. And it's like you have all these weeks in a row of teams who are going to be in a, I don't want to say similar boat, but
I would say
they're in
similar boat.
it's kind of a similar boat. And I would take the Chargers in every single one of those games over any of those matchups just because of the knowledge in that coach in the coaching room, the quarterback at that position. Like Harbaugh is going to know how to keep drives going. He's going to know how to utilize his team, specifically his running backs and his quarterback to keep drives going. And that, especially early on in the season, to be able to figure out your team and work through these things against some crappy teams early on, like that's going to be key for them. And that's why I'm saying, like, if they can start off hot and they can figure out what's working, and you get to sprinkle in some of these games against some playoff teams and see how you really stack up, and shoot, they pick up one of those games and all of a sudden morale's up. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
they could really roll. And that's what I'm banking on. I think there's a story to be said about the Chargers this year.
I like that. This is good. This is the point of the exercise. We're gonna have differing takes on a lot of these teams, and I was ready.
Absolutely.
I was not expecting 11-6 for the Chargers. That's a nice take. I like that. I like that.
Well,
Where,
were you expecting 6-11 with the Raiders?
I could see that happening. I don't. I'm banking on 8-9 because they finished. If I'm correct, they finished right at that record. Yeah, they were 8-9 last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll be right around the same. They have the same level of talent. I think the quarterback play is going to be a little bit better, but you lose Josh Jacobs. You're still figuring out some pieces, but
Who's
Antonio
their
Pierce
quarterback week one?
depends on. I would say Gardner. I would say
You think
Gardner
so?
Minshew. Yeah, I mean Minshew's not a bad QB. I think, but if you want to try and
Aiden's
go,
run the offense.
yeah, if you want to go for the young guy, which you already know, but I also think Gardner has a level of leadership and experience that
Right.
some of these guys, and maybe Devontae Adams, would want. But yeah, I agree that and that's the thing. That's where I have them. Like, I don't think they're going to be great because they haven't improved the QB. I think they missed
Right.
out in the draft, and that was the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
But they have weapons and they have pieces, so it's I see them being better, and the energy around this team is going to be a lot better than it was last year. It was toxic and terrible. So
Yeah, I'm struggling with that O line. It's not good.
yeah, no, it's
And
not.
and you've got Garner Minshew, who I think is probably going to be starter week one. And then I also see a situation throughout the season where they continue to struggle. It's back to Aiden O'Connell, and it's and then you're banking on him, just kind of developing, and maybe you take a shot on him next year starting. But I'm looking at that O line, and I'm worried because like Garner Minshew and Aiden probably without a really solid O line won't be able to make much noise.
Yeah.
It's like, and this whole quarterback thing in training camp reminds me so much of the Trey Lance, Jimmy G time here in San Francisco. Like, it's like, who we rolling out week one? Like, is it a battle? Like, what are we doing here? But, you still have Devontae Adams, and I watched all of the receiver series, and midway through last year, you see how upset he gets at just the situation that he's in. Not just how bad the team is doing and that, but he gets frustrated that you start to see like almost as if he's regretting ever going to the Raiders. He
Yeah.
never says that, and he probably never will until he's retired and he actually feels that way and says it. But that's to be said. But it appears that way. And so it's like, you really didn't capitalize on getting a solid quarterback in the offseason. And you're probably going to be throwing away another year of Devontae Adams. And his attitude is only going to get worse. He bought into the culture at the end of last year because, well, how could you not when everything was going the way it was? And then you start to kind of turn things around when you fire your coach. And it's a whole thing. But
Yeah.
the tight end room is really good. And I think that, like, the run game's not going to be as good as it was, but I think that
Right.
they'll find success with it because you're going to have to. I don't think that Garner and Aiden will be able to push the ball down the field that much. So I'm looking at like their schedule, and I'm looking at just the state of their team. There's so many questions for me personally, and like I don't see the magic from the end of last year carrying into this year.
Same, and that's fine. I agree with you that I think we're both on the same page that they're going to be mediocre at best. And they're probably going to steal a few games, but not really be good at all the whole season.
That D line is terrifying for the record, though.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I think their defense will keep them in games. I think that that like I said, they have good pieces, so it's going to keep them relevant. But they're not going to win this division or make any noise. So, and then obviously on Denver, they got their quarterback situation is worse to be frank. Until they said a lot of good things about Bo Nix. I don't know how to feel. And then when your backup is Jared Stidham or Zach Wilson, and they're like, "Oh, maybe Zach Wilson can start," I'm like, "This is not what you want." So, and they have players that every other team wants. They want everyone. Everyone's hoping they trade Pat Surtain or Cortland Sutton or anything like that, but they're holding on to those guys, hoping that they can keep them relevant for the meantime while Sean Payton figures this out and hopes that his QB works out. So,
what was your record that you had for the Broncos?
4-13.
I did them dirty, man.
Oh no, how bad is it?
1-16.
Wow. See, that's dramatic. Yeah. That's what I like about this.
It's dramatic, but the reason being is I'm sick when I look at that roster because the only guys that I see like that would make some noise are involved in trade talks.
Yeah.
And it's like there's no like clear direction other than complete and utter rebuild. And like Bo Nix, he struggles to push the ball down the field. That's kind of a thing with him. Like, to take deep shots and stuff like that, it's not really his game. Like, he's more a dink and dunk quarterback. And it's I don't know. Their defense isn't great. It's going to be a rough year for the Broncos, regardless of what their record is, because they don't have an easy schedule, I don't think. Like, I'm looking at their strength of schedule. They're towards the bottom end. They're 25th
in strength.
So they're going to struggle this year. They play some good teams. It's going to be a rough year for them, but kind of did it to themselves. And they're still paying Russell Wilson, I'm pretty sure. So
they have no room to improve either. So they are going to have to eat this for a little bit.
Yeah.
But it better to bite the bullet and start kind of the rebuild. And the question is, Pat Surtain's young enough, they can still pay him, and that's up to him if he wants to stay or whatever the heck it is. But they should free PS2, honestly, in my opinion.
Just go to the Niners.
Yeah.
Take a
No, we're not gonna do that, but it's okay. But yeah, no, I think enough on the AFC West. Let's talk about the next division. We'll go with the AFC South. So I will let you pick your teams, or let me know who your division winner is first. So first, let's talk about the DraftKings betting odds for this division. So they have the Houston Texans at plus 105 as the favorites in the division, the Jacksonville Jaguars at plus 275, Indianapolis Colts at plus 310, and the Tennessee Titans at plus 1,000. So who's your winner in this division?
I have the Texans winning the division, and it's kind of not close. I really like that Texans team. I have them going 12-5. But
okay, yeah, that's cool.
I'm looking at the additions that they made in the offseason, and especially with like Stephon Diggs, just adding the pieces that they did around CJ Stroud, who they're already continuing to build around. And I see so many avenues of success, like landing Danielle Hunter, Danico Autry, Aziz Alshire. And then they traded they didn't have to give up much at all for Joe Mixon, I don't think. I'm trying to remember.
No, they didn't have to do that much for him. I think it was a 6th round pick.
Yeah, it was super weak. But they added so much this offseason on an already, I don't want to say Cinderella run, but nobody really expected them to make the noise they did last year. And so you're building momentum, and then you've got a somewhat favorable schedule rolling into next year. Like, I don't know. Well, I guess they are 20. They're 26th on the
Yeah, they have a first place
strength of
schedule.
schedule. They do.
Yeah.
That's true. So I don't know. But that's the thing. I went week by week for all these teams like you did,
Hmm.
and I saw so many matchups for the Texans where I just see them capitalizing, and I just don't see many teams who can defensively stop that offense. And then on top of that, that defense is pretty solid too. So I think the Texans have got a really good shot to make a lot of noise in the AFC this year.
I agree with your take that they're going to win the division. I have them at 11-6, so just one under you. I do think that they're not going to sneak up on anybody, and I think the expectations teams are going to come at them a lot harder. CJ Stroud isn't surprising anybody with how freaking good he is, so it'll be interesting to see if they can stay healthy, because that was a huge thing too last year. They were good despite all these injuries to the receivers, their linemen, like everyone across the board was getting hurt. So even I think they will be really good, especially if they sustain a level of health. That's something that's important. And Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon, like, they added good pieces. I agree with you. And
Yeah.
D'Amico is proven to be a nice coach who seems to get the message across to this team. I do think that they will be in the mix, but I also think that when I compare them to some of these, to the top tier teams that I have, like, I agree they're going to have a good schedule enough. Like, they're in the division where they're going to be able to get good enough wins. Um, and they're going to make some noise in some of these primetime matchups. They're going to be one of the most fun teams to watch this year. Everyone's going to keep an eye out of the Houston Texans, but I see them making noise, but not being the top of the top just yet. I do think they're like a year away from that. And again, if everyone can stay healthy, maybe it elevates them a little bit more. But I could see them getting 12-5. But I'm gonna keep them at 11-6. For that reason. So who are your 2, 3, and 4?
So 2 is going to be Jacksonville, and 3 is the Colts. 4 is the Titans.
Okay.
So Jacksonville, look, they had a really bad year last year, and it was plagued by a lot of different reasons. Injuries was a factor as well. This offseason, they lost Calvin Ridley to the Titans, but they kind of picked up some solid players in return. So they're still a good team. I think that, like, consistency and health are going to be a major factor throughout their season, which is, I mean, it's the factor for the vast majority and all of the NFL. But personally, like, I need to see Trevor Lawrence step up. Like, I need to see him be a leader this year and really take control. Like, that's something I haven't seen from Trev yet in his career. Like, even just listening in on the huddles and stuff like that, where he's trying to get his team fired up, it's just not there. And I'm like, this is a team that is building around you right now. This is an organization that's building around you right now. You need to take it under your wing at this point. Like, look at a guy like Brock Purdy, who was, I hate to make the comparison, I always bring him up, but he was the last pick in the draft, and dude knows how to fire up his team when he's the smallest guy in the locker room sometimes. And it's like, there's situations where you as a quarterback need to not just take the physical play into your hands, but you need to take the mental aspect as well. Like, you can be cool, calm, and composed, sure, but some guys don't operate like that. And that's kind of the thing with Trev that I don't see. And that's that I don't feel like he really gets to, like, he knows his team, but I don't think he knows how to really drive them. And that's what I feel is missing with Jacksonville right now. So it's going to be interesting to see if he develops into that role, because I think that would elevate the team. But I don't know how you feel.
So before I do that, what did you have as their record?
I had
Curious.
9-8.
Okay, perfect. Same. So by the way, my 2, 3, 4 were exactly the same. Jacksonville, Indy, Tennessee. Jacksonville for me was also 9-8, and I agree with you mostly on the Trevor Lawrence aspect of it. I think the funny thing about this team is, like, they didn't get talked about as much because everyone was more focused on the Eagles collapse, but this team
Yeah.
also very much had a collapse. They were 8-1
Yeah.
until they ran into the Niners, and then all of a sudden, Trevor gets hurt and he's playing through injury, and this team, they were going through their own internal issues. The coaching, Doug Peterson, was like, "Oh, I'm giving up play calling. Oh, never mind, I'm not giving up play calling. Oh, this is a defensive coordinator's fault. We're going to fire him." And it was just it's not a
One thing
well
after the other.
yeah, it's still not a well-run organization, and Trevor's
Mhm.
kind of been the only thing keeping them afloat. And I think they kind of see that same thing. That's probably why they paid him all that money, because now they're locked into him long term. They believe in what he's able to do, and Christian Kirk, Brian Thomas, Gabriel Davis, like that's going to be an Evan Ingram. That's going to be like that's a nice skill position group. I do agree, like Calvin Ridley, losing him hurts a little bit. And Travis Etienne, like they got pieces, and they
Mhm.
have good pieces on the defensive end. They just there's something about this team that they just can't seem to put it together because of their own dysfunction. And I believe they were 9-8 last year, and I think they're going to finish
Yep.
exactly the same because, like you said, they have a lot of stuff to figure out. And unless Trevor is unbelievable this year, they're not going to really make that big of a leap. I think they're going to stay right there, and they need to add some more pieces, or maybe even fix the coaching situation. As much as I love Dougie P, the result this is a results driven league, and they haven't been able to deliver. So,
Yeah.
um, so I was curious, why do you have what's your indie record?
Indy, I have 8-9.
Same. Okay, bet we're
Yeah.
unlocking the AFC South here.
I think the Colts, they're starting to get good, and they're trending in the right direction. Um, I think that Anthony Richardson, all the stuff that happened to him with the injuries last year, those specific injuries, it's a little scary. And you got to kind of talk to him and be like, hey, man, maybe use your head a little bit different. Um, but if he can stay healthy, like that's going to be massive for them because he missed, I don't know the number of games, but he missed a lot of games last year.
He only played 4
Um,
games last year.
yeah, he missed a ton of games. And I think that when the games that he was out there, yeah, we got a small batch, but that team looked like they were good. Not going to make crazy noise, but it was that trending that I just talked about. They're trending in the right direction. So health is going to be major for them. They have really good talent. It's tough because AFC is loaded right now. So they're starting to get in the right direction along with a lot of other teams at the same time. So it'll be a good year for them, but I'm really looking at what they do next offseason and then going into next year. I think that's when they're going to really start to make some noise. So this is really just a building block year for the Colts.
Yeah, and I think another thing, the Colts have been receiving a lot of hype. Like I do think
Yeah.
like if they would, I think a lot of people would say that they're the second best team and closer to Houston than a lot of other people would think. Um, but I think there was a lot of things that went their way last year that have people thinking differently. Like again, Anthony Richardson only had 90 snaps, like 90 pass dropbacks. And in the grand scheme of things, that's nothing. We still don't know anything about him yet. We've seen spurts, we've seen flashes, we've seen rookie mistakes, and he's basically a rookie. And that's going to be interesting. And I know the hype is, oh, they almost made the playoffs last year with Gardner. Oh, we're adding Anthony Richardson. Oh, we're going to be great. And they drafted Laiatu Latu. They re-signed Michael Pittman. Like they made good moves. But one thing that is probably going to regress is their defense a little bit. Their defense was one of the best in sacks last year. Like their front four all got 8+ sacks, and they made up for the no names that they have at the cornerback. Like I don't think anybody can you name a cornerback playing for the Indianapolis Colts right now, because I actually don't, now that I think about it. They
No, I can't.
they had a terrible room, and that was the same way last year, but they were helped by a very efficient defensive line. And I just don't think, very much like the Eagles of last year, they're going to regress to the mean a little bit. Um, and I just think that they're still a work in progress. Shane Steichen's an awesome coach, former Philly guy. I love it. I think he's a great coach, and him and Anthony will make a good team if so long as Anthony can stay healthy. That's going to be the really important aspect of this team. I think this year should just be a focus on Anthony Richardson's growth, and that the team will go as far as he takes them. But there's going to be, just like a rookie season, there's going to be growing pains. So it's just a
Yeah.
matter of, can he stay healthy? And I think we're going to see this defense suffer just a little bit, and they're still probably going to be 8-9, like you said, a year and off season away from a few moves, and I think they'll be in a good spot. I like that team. Like they're a frisky team, but it'll be. I don't know if I think that you should just slow down a tiny bit on the hype. It's just how I think.
I fully agree. And look, to kind of, I guess, build on the hype, 8-9 in the situation that we're all just discussing, where your quarterback is is essentially a rookie who you want to go out there and make those mistakes, but also take the shots and like learn, just go out there and develop as a player. And then you're adding all these different pieces, youth pieces around him as well. Like it's a year of just like get reps under your belt kind of thing is kind of why I look at for the Colts. It's a building year. To be 8-9, that's not bad. Like that's not a bad record for that kind of a situation. Like I would look at that, and a lot of ways I would think you have like 5 wins, 6 wins. So to be 8-9, like you are literally building yourself, and you're on the verge of breaking that 500 mark, and then starting to really make noise inside your division. And they're on this similar timeline with like the Texans in that regard. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be like the Texans and the Colts for the next, after this year, for the next like 5 or 6 years, honestly.
You know, the funny thing about this division, the AFC South, is there's just 4 young quarterbacks in this division. And the funny part is if all of these guys pan out, this could be one of the best divisions in football. So all of these teams are kind of in a nicer spot than some of these other bottom feeder teams. But Indy, I like, and they have young pieces like Latu they drafted this year. I'm excited to see how he does. It'll be interesting to see just what is the next step for a lot of these teams. And they were 9-8 last year. And again, that comes from competent play. Gardner Minshew knew Shane Steichen's systems from Philly. It's something that, he's already been used to. So that's a product of knowing your system and being good at it. And Anthony Richardson still needs to learn it a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. And I want to talk about this Titans team a little bit, but I definitely lowballed them too. I don't know what your record was for that. Oh God.
I'm disrespectful.
Oh no.
I had them at 2-15.
Okay, but what can you see them as outside of 2-15, or do you genuinely see them in 2-15?
No, I really don't.
I think the exercise is weird.
Yeah, I think they have like 6 wins. I think 6 is probably their around that mark is where I would put them. Probably their floor and their ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Will Levis. Like he's gonna be good. He adding Calvin Ridley, like that's an option for him, and that's something that like it could go a really long way in his development early on. Like to be able to have that options. I mean, we've seen so many great quarterbacks in the league, who, when you look at their career trajectories, like when they started out early, they had that great receiver, at least one option that they could consistently rely on. And I think that Calvin Ridley is going to be that for Will. So I like that. I do think that the defense is going to be good. I don't think it's great, but I do think that they could probably win them a game or two. They have a first-year head coach in Brian Callahan. Like there's going to be an adjustment period for them. So there's a lot of new with this Titans team that I'm just looking at it, and I definitely see a growth period where it's going to take time to really get all this implemented.
Yeah, Brian Callahan coming from Cincinnati, he's going to be an interesting coach for them. Yeah. And not only did they add Calvin Ridley, but from Cincy they added Tyler Boyd, and they're on the defensive side of the ball. They got L'Jarius Sneed from Kansas City, and then they drafted an offensive lineman. It was J.C. Latham in the first round. So they're doing the right things to build around a young quarterback. And I think, especially offensively, you have DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, and Calvin Ridley. That's a nice little trio. And then they got, obviously you lose Derrick Henry to Baltimore, but then you go Tony Pollard, so you kind of have a not the greatest back, but at least not a back that you're going to suffer with, and he's a good receiving back. So let's see if Tony Pollard can find some form. But they have nice pieces, and they still have Jeffrey Simmons on defense. Like there's going to be a nice level of veteran presence to help grow with this young-ish team and help Will Levis's development. They're really banking on Will Levis being something, but it's also like they can get out of it. And I don't think that if it doesn't pan out, it's not the worst thing. And But Will Levis has shown flashes of potential, and he knows who to feed. But now that he has multiple options, it'll be definitely interesting to see if having those extra options helps DeAndre in the long run get more open or things like that, or if they're just going to put all their focus, somebody else is going to be open. I think they have the recipe. They have the right
They
recipe.
do.
But I don't know. Like you said, I don't know. There's going to be more growing pains with this team than a team like Indy or Houston or something like that.
Yeah. So what record did you have them at?
I had them at 5-12.
Okay.
So like they're good because they're frisky enough to win games. I think they have enough pieces that are going to win them some games. But I also think that like talent wise, they're still missing a few pieces to really contend or keep up with a lot of these teams.
Yeah, I know they're gonna have a tougher schedule. I think they're 27th on the list on the schedule list, but yeah, they're gonna be an interesting team to keep an eye on because, like you said, they're gonna be frisky. They'll squeak out some games that they probably shouldn't have, but they'll get it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's move on to one of the. This was tough to decide which was going to be the most frisky division in this conference, but we're going to talk about the AFC East next, and this is probably I'm very interested to see who you have here. So I'll lead the way, but before we do, let's go to the betting lines here. So we got the New York Jets, and the Buffalo Bills both tied at plus 180. Then you got the Miami Dolphins right behind at plus 200, and the New England Patriots set to fail at plus 2,500. But that's not the Patriots don't matter. Obviously, they're a rebuilding team. We already know kind of the idea of where they're going to go. But I'll start with my division winner, and I debated this a ton. I really did, and I didn't think I was going to talk myself into this. I have the Jets winning the division at 12-5.
Wow.
I have the Jets winning the division at 12-5. I don't like Aaron Rodgers. And last year I remember consistently crapping on him last year. But this was a 7-10 team with Zach Wilson as their quarterback. This is still one of the best defensive units in the entire league. And all Rodgers has to do is stay upright, and he's going to play significantly better than Zach Wilson did last year. And obviously, there's training camp, nuggets of him and Garrett Wilson getting into it, Rodgers being moody and angry. But that's also a part of, again, I don't like him as a person, but he is a winner and he knows what it takes. And he holds everybody to a standard that these young guys just aren't used to. And because he holds himself to that standard, I think it's going to make a lot of these young guys better. Even if Aaron Rodgers isn't the MVP Aaron Rodgers, by the time he's done, it's going to elevate the floor of this young roster for some of these weapons that they have. And again, 12-5, that's their best season since I think ever. This would be their most wins in their franchise at 12 wins. So it's something they haven't done it. And this is a very boomer bust team, given what we saw last year. They're prone to injuries with Breece Hall and everything like that, but they got weapons. Their O-line is still a question. They added Tyron Smith, also an injury question. So it's like they tried to improve. They tried to fix the issue, and they're adding a bunch of injury-prone guys to the roster. Mike Williams. It'll be very interesting to see how it pans out. But if it hits, I think they'll be the winner in this division. All right, light me up.
The last two things that you said are where I'm going to start. So you talked about the O-line being what it is right now, not that great, and you talked about the injuries. So let me start with those two things. That O-line, Aaron's going to need to dip out of the pocket so many times. He's going to get hit so many times this year, and he's already up there in age. I am so worried about him getting hit that many times throughout, let's just say a 6-week span. Okay. We'll call it. I know that they have like the 4th easiest schedule right now. That's something to consider, but like these are still big defensive players that he's going to see every single week. Having a guy, just run right into you, tack you to the ground. Like obviously all it took last year was one wrong step for him, one wrong tackle. And he was down the whole season. I really wonder if that O-line continuing to let him get hit is going to stack up. And that's why I don't have them going 12-5. I have them at 10-7.
Okay.
Now,
that's
the defense, you touched on the defense. The the defense is going to win them a lot of games. That's what's going to keep them above the 500 mark. And I think that it can honestly probably win them 7 games as it sits. That doesn't mean that I'm saying that their offense is only going to win 3 games, but I'm saying that defense alone, look what it did last year, right?
Yeah.
So the defense is loaded. I'm concerned with the depth all over that team. Like you talk about some of those guys, being a little older and injury prone. Well, coming up behind them is guys without much experience. And that's concerning, So I'm looking at that and I'm looking at the Robert Saleh situation. There's a lot on his shoulders right now. If this is I'll say, I don't want to say a losing season. If they don't hit their goal, which is undisclosed, I don't know what their goal is for the year. I'm not a Jets fan. I'm not close to the Jets. But if they don't hit their goal, Saleh's job is even more, like he's even more on the hot seat at that point. And that makes for tough conversations. That makes for a tough locker room, especially after losses. Like, it's not fun to be a part of. So I love Robert Saleh, so I want to see him be successful. He won't be successful week 1 against the Niners, but the rest of the season, go off, King. Like, go off. But with so many new players, I just don't see, like, they need to get off to a very hot start for them to have a good season. And it has to be quick. Like, they almost have to start like 6-0 for me to really be invested in this team. Because if they're 3-3 through the first 6 weeks, if they're 2-4, I will be considering myself, correct on my call, because I'm not huge on this Jets team. So I can tell you my winner if you like.
Sure, go for it. Let's hit it.
I got the Bills, man.
I knew it. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. What's their record?
12-5.
Okay, so we both had 12-5 for our winners. That's fine.
Yeah.
All right, tell me about the Bills. Why do you think they're winning?
Obviously, there's no more Stephon Diggs. That's a hit for them. But they've still got a damn good run game. They've still got Josh Allen, who, yes, he puts the ball in harm's way, but he also makes some amazing plays. He's arguably a top 3 quarterback in the league at times. The wide receiver core is still good. I think that Stephon Diggs was a lot of the reason why Josh had as much success as he did. However, I still think that they're going to find different ways to get the ball into his receivers' hands and continue to find success, especially with the fact that their running back game is solid. You can still bank on them to get a first down and keep gritty plays, gritty drives going. And that's what matters in the long run. There's going to be an adjustment on to the offensive scheme, kind of like what I just talked about. And I think it's going to take some time. You're really banking on Keon Coleman, who is their guy in the draft, right? That was who they picked to take Stephon Diggs' place. Like, if he can develop early and find a rhythm, like, this team could be really good. And that's a lot of the reason why I have the Bills going 12-5, is because I have a lot of faith in Keon. I think he's going to be a really good player, and I think he's going to be reliable. I think he's everything that the Bills needed right now. So and obviously the defense is about the same as last year. It will probably win you 1 or 2 games as it sits. Not amazing, but they're a really good defense. So that's where I think of the Bills.
I think for me, and I had them at second at 11-6. So we're kind of on the same ballpark of how good we think they're going to be. I do think, though, they suffered so much turnover on the defensive end, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, given that their whole entire defense was injured. Like, their coordinator, Tre'Davious White, had injuries. Matt Milano was out for a while. Von Miller just looked old by the end of the season, like he was cooked. So, like, and they had to sacrifice a lot to avoid the cap. Like, they really just said, hey, we're going to lose half of our defense and just rebuild from scratch and just plug and play and see what happens. And I think that Josh Allen is good enough to elevate this team to an 11-6 record, or at least at worst 10 wins. Like, he is arguably a top 3 at his best. And I do think, like you said, they adjusted offensive coordinators midway through the season. That was part of the whole thing. It was after the Eagles game. They were like, we're firing our offensive coordinator. He's not doing it for us. And everyone thought, oh, this is kind of a cop out. But then they started going towards a run first approach with, it was Cook, but I forget his last name. I know it's Dalvin Cook's little brother, James Cook, I believe. But once they started taking that run first approach, they started seeing a lot more consistent success. And I think that's something that, especially for Josh Allen, like you mentioned, who likes to throw the ball in harm's way, if you take away a little bit of the pressure off of him and not force him to be Superman, even though he can be, and it's awesome, but trying to be Superman is what cost them a few of these games. So it's, if they can just stay consistent and find a nice balance in this offense, like they have good pieces, and I think they will still be just fine in this division and in the AFC. They have enough they have enough experience, and they still have the potential, and they got younger in the right spots. And I think they're going to do their best of making the most of what they have. And Sean McDermott's a defensive first coach, so the defense is still going to be, competitive, and they're still going to find a good way to do it. So no, I like the Bills, but I couldn't put them. At first I was like, oh man, the Bills are going to be good. And then I thought about all the changes, and I was like, okay, wait, maybe I should make them good, but they're not going to be great. So we'll see. I have them at 11-6. So what about you? So the only team, obviously we know New England's probably going to be the barn burner, but did you have the Jets with their 10-7 at second, or were they third?
Yeah. So I had the Bills at 1, the Jets at second, and I had the Dolphins at second. However, I had the Dolphins having the same record as the Jets at 10-7, but okay. I think that the Jets win on that tiebreaker. Look, I really like Miami. I love their offense, and I love Mike McDaniels. I miss Mike McDaniels. He was one of my favorite coaches, still is one of my favorite former coaches from the Niners. Like, everything he is, his whole swagger, the way he carries himself, he's a cool dude. But they signed Tua to a big contract this offseason. They lost a lot of good pieces, and they didn't really replace them well either. The offensive line is going to be really good, which is something that's really important for a guy like Tua at this point in his career, who at this point, like, he takes another shot that he took anything similar to 2 years ago, and we might not see another play from him. So it's good for him to have that O-line. They still have Tyreek Hill, who is arguably the best receiver in the league. There's so many things about this Miami team that's good. The problem with them is the consistency. And I look from top to bottom at their schedule, and I see a lot of the games that they have to play. And I know that they've got one of the easier schedules, but I'm looking at some of the times of the year that they go to, for instance, like to Buffalo, and it's going to be freezing cold, and potentially could be a snow game or rain game, whatever. And that completely changes how your offense plays a football game. And so I look at a lot of the timing that they're playing certain teams this year, and I'm wondering if they can still continue to be that dominating offense. And I'm banking on it probably not happening. So I think that the 10-7 is a good record for them. And I think that they, like I said, lose that tiebreaker to the Jets and get the third place.
I think for me, and the Dolphins are one of the teams that I felt in this exercise were one of my casualties, that I was a little lower on. I had them at 8 and 9. They were still third. And I ran into this issue too. I was like, they struggled with injuries, not just with their quarterback, but often Tyreek Hill's amazing. But half the end of the year last year, he was struggling with his hamstring and struggling to consistently stay on the field and produce. And when they're on, they're on. But the problem is I don't think they're going to be able to maintain that unless Jalen Waddle takes that next leap. But he also deals with injuries. So this team is very volatile. Same with the offensive line. Like, they've dealt with so many injuries last year. They were up to, when they played the Eagles, they were up to like their third string, fourth string guard in that game. And I was thinking to myself, like, they're going to run into a lot of these issues. And they're not trapped because they did a really good job with how they signed Tua. With how they did his contract was every year that he's on the roster is guaranteed, so long as he's on the roster. So they have a get out of jail free card with Tua. So if he's hurt, they can kick him off the roster and they won't have to owe him anything, extra on the contract. So they did a good job there. And I like the extension for him for both parties. He's been an extremely successful player, but the way this offense is built, it's built around Tua. It's not built around the speed receivers. It's not built around the running game. It's built around the success that Tua has. If Tua is good, this team is good. And like you mentioned, they run into a lot of cold games at the end of the year. They not only see Buffalo, they see Green Bay at Lambeau. They see the Jets and Cleveland all in the months of November and December. And I'm thinking to myself, it's going to be 20 degrees. And they haven't won a single game that's under 40. So it's one of those things that can't be ignored. And they were not good against playoff teams last year. When there was a team, they're a very fun finesse team, good with speed. But the second you run into a physical, tough team, which a lot of the teams they're going to be facing are, then they kind of shrink a little bit. They shrink in the moment. And Tua stayed healthy last year. That's great for them. That's a boon. But like you said, anything like what he suffered in 22 is scary, and that thought is still ingrained in people's mind because they've showed it 70 times on live TV. So it's one of those things that will always follow him. And again, a lot of moving parts. Vic Fangio, the defensive end, they still have Jalen Ramsey. They have decent pieces, but they did have a lot of turnover on the defensive end either that they didn't really get better at. Their offense is still probably going to be the engine that drives this team, but I couldn't see them. They're going to be really fun and frisky at the beginning of the year. They're going to light up the scoreboard. They're going to be awesome to start. But then once the weather starts getting colder, once the season gets longer, guys get hurt, guys slow down, they're just going to run into a wall, I think. Very much it's going to hit them a little harder than it did last year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, watching Christian Wilkins walk out the door, that was a big hit for them. And then keeping in mind Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips coming back from serious injuries, it's gonna be interesting to see how quickly they get reacclimated to everything. But yeah, I just, it's not the same roster that it was last year. And last year you still ran into some issues and some walls that are tough enough to knock down. So gonna be interesting to see how they take the lid off the basket this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, there's not much to say about New England. They are in full rebuild mode. They are moving on from their legendary head coach, Bill Belichick, and now they've had his replacement there for a while, Gerard Mayo. He's currently beefing with Matthew Judon on the sideline, and that's becoming a whole thing. So Matthew Judon is most likely not on that roster coming up, but they got defense has always been their calling card, and it's going to continue to be that way. And offensively, they're still, Jacoby Brissett's going to be their guy to start while they work in Drake May. They have time. They have the longest leash of anyone in the league, and it'll be interesting to see. I had them at 5-12. Their win total projection this year was 5. I think that's still generous. I don't know if they doubt, because their defense is going to be good. As Christian Gonzalez comes back, he looks really good. He's a special player, so it'll be interesting to see how they do. I don't know what you had them as, or if you had them at 0-17 or whatever the heck you had them.
1-16. That's where I have them. And I'm going to hold it.
That's fair.
They're going to be terrible.
They are.
I just don't like their team. And also, I hate the Patriots in general. So eat this, Patriots fan. Y'all had Tom Brady for years and years and years. You know what success is. You can enjoy this losing for now.
Yeah, they'll be back. Maybe not as strong, but they'll be back in a little bit. They got time.
Yeah, no, that's true.
They just got to be patient. All right. So probably not just the toughest division in this conference, but probably the toughest division in all of football, which provides a lot of fun content, the AFC North. So this is probably going to be the takes that bug you a little bit, that you're probably going to be a little bit surprised about. Actually, maybe not, because all these teams are good. So this is going to be the thing. So let's talk about their DraftKings betting odds. So we got the Bengals are the favorite in this division at plus 140. They're expecting a huge comeback from Joe Shiesty. And then we got the Baltimore Ravens at plus 145. And then Cleveland Browns at plus 600. And the Steelers at plus 800. So I'm going to start with my division winner. But before I do, I want to ask you this question. Do you think that, because I'm looking at these betting odds now, do you think it's disrespectful to Baltimore that they are not the favorite in this division, just on the betting odds of it all?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I agree, but let's, I digress. My winner is the Baltimore Ravens, and it was close. But I had them at 13-4. This is I see it. I understand it. They have an extremely tough schedule. But I also think that one of the things that they decided to do was buy into their identity even more. And Derrick Henry is going to be an extremely important piece. And I think having Lamar and Derrick as a tag team is going to help one another stay upright for a longer point in time in this season. Their offensive line is fine, not great, but fine given the situation that they're in. Obviously, they lost a couple pieces on the defense, Patrick Queen going to Pittsburgh, everything like that. But it's still a freaking good defense. Although they did lose their important defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, over to Seattle. So that is a huge loss. But that they've filtered through coordinators, and John Harbaugh is an awesome coach, and he's been consistent, and he knows how to get the best out of this team. And I think every year Lamar has something to prove. There's always a chip on his shoulder, and he's one of the best players to not really win, to have that level of success in the playoffs. And I do think that I think they're just going to execute and have another good regular season. They're a tough team to beat, and they just always find a way to eke out wins because they're really unorthodox in how they play. So I had them at 13-4. I don't know if they're your winner too. So
They're my winner, and 13-4. It's a crazy record because I have them at 14-3.
oh my gosh,
Now,
no way.
what you just spoke to, the different ways of finding, to beat whatever team is in front of them, is the biggest reason why I have that record at what it is. They lost 3 out of 5 of their starters on the offensive line. And that's a major hit to a line that was already kind of questionable. So now they've got an O-line that, and looking at how they drafted, like they always just draft for the best talent at the time. They're not a fill kind of a team. They don't fill the need. They always just draft the best available. So that O-line is still trash. But you've got the best quarterback in the league in terms of getting out of the pocket to use his legs and go get however many yards you need. So if there's any, situation that Lamar could thrive in, it's probably this one. You don't really need an amazing O-line to win games with Lamar Jackson. And so looking at that, like offensively, they're going to be fine. Adding Derrick Henry, I think is actually being, it's kind of being underrated right now. I think people looked at the last few years with Derrick Henry and they're like, well, he's just not the same King Henry, like he's not what he once was because of injuries and because of situations. Well, yeah, he had to carry a team on his back for the last 5 years, like solely him. And he did a damn good job of it. Now he gets to go to a situation where a quarterback can beat you with his legs. The running back can beat you with his legs. You have wide receivers that can beat you with their legs. Like, this is a fast-paced offense that has a lot of different ways to beat you. And I think that teams are going to they're going to struggle a lot with figuring out ways to stop the Ravens from scoring. And then you figure out how to stop them. We haven't even talked about their defense yet. That defense is still one of the best in the league, probably top 5. So I just think this team's going to be really, really good.
Yeah, and again, I can only imagine, especially if, Lamar and Henry stay healthy together, just trying to game plan on how to stop Derrick Henry in the middle of December when it's freezing cold and it's already harder to bring dudes down.
Right.
And he's a little bit more fresh because it's not going to be his responsibility to run every single play. And it's a change of pace. Lamar's got the speed and Derrick Henry's just going to beat you with power. So they're an interesting team and they have a lot to prove. And I think Lamar's just getting a little bit more consistent every year. And obviously, you can say what you want about, his style of play and if, how good of a quarterback really is he, but he's a winner. He has the highest winning percentage in this modern era. And it's especially in the regular season. And that's something that he just knows how to win games, and this team knows how to win with Lamar. So they're always going to be a threat. And I couldn't put them. It was a close debate between this and my second place team, but it was definitely something I had to think about. So my second place team.
Mm-hmm.
I'm back on the Bengals, baby.
Mm-hmm.
I got the Bengals going 12-5, and they have a cookie cutter schedule. compared to the AFC North, because if you look at the strength of schedule, the AFC North, all the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Browns, they're hiding out at the highest level of strength of schedule, and then all of a sudden you go to the bottom 10 and you see the Cincinnati Bengals chilling there, and I'm like, they have a fourth place schedule in the toughest conference, or in the toughest division, where the toughest games are going to probably be within their own division and Philly, because they're going to lose to Philly ultimately. But Joe Burrow, he's said some weird stuff in the offseason. He's obviously doing the whole weird hairdo thing because he's bored. But whatever. They kept T. Higgins on the franchise tag, so he's playing it out. He's gonna be a good player and a good teammate, and actually play out a contract, even though he deserves more. So they have him, Jamar Chase. They moved on from Mixon, and I believe they got Moss, and they got a couple other guys in their place. They're going to be a good team. If Joe's gotten a chance to get healthy, that's going to be the important part, because last year it was, nagging injury this, and he's showing up to the game with a wrist, and it wasn't a wrist injury, and it wasn't reported. And it was like, if they can shake off kind of that rust that they had, and Joe's not playing at 50%, they're a good team. Like, we saw them play against the Niners last year, and what was as close to full strength as they were, and that they're a tough team. They're still a team that went to the Super Bowl a few years ago, and they still have all of those pieces there. So I'm banking on them having an easier schedule, a lighter, a few more games that they're going to be able to take this year, and they still have a good defensive group. I think they're going to be just fine. Even if they lost Brian Callahan, Zach Taylor was, part of the architect. He's an offensive-minded coach, so he's still going to have his imprint on there. So it's not going to be, I don't think the drop-off is going to be crazy when you have the weapons that you do.
Yeah, so I had the Bengals as my second place too, and I had them coming in at a record of 13-4, and a lot of that is to do with I'm banking on Burrow staying healthy all year long, and I'm also looking at that strength of schedule. I mean, they really only run into like a few tough games where you're like, man, I don't think they're going to win that. And obviously, this is looking at it prior to the season even starting, right? But banking on Burrow being healthy seems like it's a tough enough task right now, because seeing, especially what happened last year, you and I sat here and talked about, should he sit out a couple weeks just so that he can come back at full strength? They didn't do that. And then we had the same conversation, but in a different style 2 weeks later, where we're like, he didn't sit out, and now they have no room to sit out. And then that injury got worse and worse. And then ultimately, like, look where their season ended up.
Mm-hmm.
So the big question is, can Burrow stay healthy? If he stays healthy, this team is going to be damn dominant. And like, they're going to give any team in the league a run for their money. And it's a good team, but there's that Burrow question for sure.
Yeah, he has started to. And I don't. People don't think about it all the time, because you see some of these other quarterbacks and what they've had to deal with. But Burrow does have a nice injury history that's been following him since he's even entered the league. So I think he's a little bit more fragile than people view him, and it's hard when you see these top quarterbacks and you're like, oh man, like Joe Burrow's just awesome. But then you see how, availability is the best ability, right? And he's not able to showcase himself when he's not 100%. So that is going to be the biggest key. And I banked on that last year, and it bit me in the butt, because I thought, I thought they were a good enough team to make it to the Super Bowl with Burrow, and they showed flashes, and, it just didn't end up working out. So if everything goes right, which I'm banking on again, see if, fool me once, shame on, whatever. But I think they're going to be a really good team. So
yeah,
we'll see.
I think one more thing I want to add too is a lot of the harder games that they play this year, they're playing in Cincinnati. And so
that's true.
That's going to be another factor for them. It's like, I don't know. It seems like this could be a year where they could sneak up on a lot of people without, and I know it's the Bengals that everyone's like, they're going to be good. They're going to be good. But I don't think people can realize how good they can be if Burrow just stays healthy. So this could be a dream season for them. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. Now comes the next two. They're going to be really interesting. The Steelers and the Browns. They're in a very similar position, in my opinion. Questionable quarterback situations are insanely amazing defenses. struggles with injuries at times. My third place team, Pittsburgh Steelers, at 10-7. They finished at 10-7 last year with Kenny Pickett, lovely backup to the Philadelphia Eagles, who might be our third stringer based off of what I'm hearing in training camp. But they were 10-7 with Kenny Pickett. Mike Tomlin has, in 17 seasons, have yet to have one below 500. So 10-7 feels right, even though he'll probably finish at 9-8. But who knows, something like that. But I also have them, as a little preview, sneaking in as my final wild card spot in the playoffs. I think they're going to make the playoffs this year. There's been a lot of good stuff coming out of camp. They're probably going to start Russell Wilson for like the first 4 games, and then they're going to say he's like hurt partially, and then they're going to play Fields and he's going to look awesome for like 4 games, and then they're going to finish with Russ, and then they're going to let Russ leave and then sign Fields to a long-term contract. And I understand they lost pieces. Like, I know offensively they lost pieces, like Deontay Johnson got traded, and their rookie receiver Roman Wilson just got hurt for a few weeks on his ankle. But they added Arthur Smith as their offensive coordinator. And say what you want about Arthur Smith, the head coach from Atlanta. He gets to run his style of offense here on a team that actually will make sense. He gets to run 2 tight end sets and run it down your throat with Najee Harris, with a change of it's a change of pace running back with Jalen Warren. And George Pickens is turning into a very nice receiver. I think he's going to be one of the better ones by the end of this year because he just has that swagger and skill to him. The whole question is the quarterback, but it's not like for me, it's not like a Raiders situation or a Broncos situation where it's like you're picking the best of 2 bad quarterbacks. Russell Wilson is better than Kenny Pickett. Justin Fields, I think, is still, and he's yet to find the right situation for him. And he picked it up towards the end of the year when you surrounded him with a good receiver in DJ Moore. And that offense was clicking towards the end of the year in Chicago. So, and on top of that, yes, their defense gets hurt, but when they're healthy, Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, they have one of the best front sevens in the entire league, especially now adding Patrick Queen. And Joey Porter Jr. is a nice addition. Minkah Fitzpatrick. They have a unit. And I definitely don't see this team going below 500 again. Or ever, honestly, so long as Mike Tomlin's freaking there. But I high key believe in the Steelers more than I thought I was going to, and they're my third. So,
well, I'm gonna probably embarrass myself, and I'm saying that the Steelers are actually gonna be 7-10.
Okay.
So
risky. Okay, I like this.
I don't really believe in this team, and a lot of it is to do with the cornball and Russell Wilson. I think that he's not what he used to be. And I think a lot of that showed in Denver. I think that whole Denver situation was a mess to begin with. I think this is already 10 times better than Denver situation ever was. But looking at it is a different quarterback problem, but it's still a quarterback problem. You have Russell Wilson and Justin Fields who can both run an offense. They can both, lead an offense down the field. But both of which have glaring issues, but in different ways. And I just feel like they're going to have identity problems because both guys play different ways. Like, you look at them as a whole, and like both of them can use their legs, both of them can launch the ball. Like, yes, they're very similar, but the way that they view the game, both quarterbacks, is entirely different. And the way that they've been utilized throughout their careers is entirely different. And so I think that early on, like they have to start hot because the back half of their schedule is really tough. Yes. And so if they start nice, they will have a good season. They will end above 500. But I have a feeling that it's going to be a rough start to the season for them because they're going to be struggling with some identity issues and figuring out. I think they're going to have like 3 weeks of bad Russell Wilson play, and then they're going to throw in Justin Fields, and then this offense is going to look different because it's going to be a different quarterback, and you have another identity problem, and it's a more growing period. And so I'm concerned about that. I think the defense, when healthy, can win you like 7 games. Like, seriously, it's a really good defense. But again, if healthy, and that's another key. So I do like that team on paper, but I wonder stylistically how it's going to work to kick off the season. And I wonder if they can actually get because I think it's Russell Wilson that starts off the season. I don't know if that's official yet, but I think that he starts the season, and if they can get him going early and he looks good early and you can just roll with him through majority of the season, then perfect. You're in a great spot. Because then you can just let Justin Fields kind of develop a little bit more this season and then, give him the next contract and roll with him from there. But I don't know, man. I just have a feeling it's not going to be as good of a season as people think.
And that's fair. It's a very, always the 2 quarterback situation is never a good one to be in. It always creates a level of volatility within the locker room and everything like that. So I agree that you might run into this issue, especially since I don't think there's a situation where they can't sit Fields all year. They need to see him with this team if they're going to pay him long term. Because that's the next move. Unless they, you want to franchise tag him, but even then I don't think that's how it works for them. My thinking for them too is I think they're going to be capable enough to kind of ride this wave. And during training camp, I followed a little bit of them on training camp. Russell was out for the first week with an ankle injury, and Fields was getting a lot of the first team reps, and they were saying a lot of good things about him, which is good for Fields and good maybe potentially for that team. Him and Pickens had a nice little catch that, everyone was posting on social media and everything. Yeah. But there's been a lot of good things about Fields, and Fields might just be in the right situation for him. And maybe the race that was a little bit, Russ is leading the field. Now it's a lot more tighter than we think. And honestly, having Russ as your backup QB might not be the worst thing either. So they only paid him a minimum contract, and that's something that, in Russ's eyes, he went to go and have a chance to play. But I think both him and Fields are aware that, this is a situation, and the Steelers as an organization, you got to pick your best point to win, not to make whoever happy. You're not the Broncos paying Russ, taking $80 million in dead cap because you were trying to make Russ happy, and then Sean Payton came in and ruined everything. So It's just, I don't know. I agree. It's a little volatile, but I'm banking on just Mike Tomlin's consistency, which is something that is not as common in this league as we've seen. And I just, I've talked myself out of the Steelers the past few years thinking they were going to be bad, and they just never were. They were never bad. They were never good. So I just think this year they're going to be more good than bad. So
let me guess then. Obviously you have the Browns at number 4.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say that you have their record at 9-8.
I'm going to triple check because I think you're correct. Yes, I had them at 9-8. Yeah. And it's as though, I could say the same exact thing about how I did the Steelers to the Browns. Incredible defense. One of the best defensive ends and defensive lines in the entire NFL. Awesome cornerback play. The defense is insane, right? And then you look at the offensive side, you have an injury-prone running back in Nick Chubb, who consistently gets big injury after big injury, even though he's amazing, and I love Nick Chubb. They traded for Jerry Jeudy. That's a nice addition, but he's usually hurt. And then Amari Cooper is awesome. They paid him a little bit, but he's also hurt. And then you look at Deshaun Watson, who is a horrible human being and still hurt, and he had a flash for 5 games where he was kind of finding his form, and then he gets hurt. And I'm just thinking to myself, their offense is going to hold this team back. But I also think their offense is good enough when they're healthy to pick up a few wins. But the question they're a much bigger, are they going to stay healthy than a few of these other teams in the league that I'm genuinely concerned of. So, but their defense is going to win them so many freaking games. It's their defense is going to be arguably the best unit in the league. Them and Pittsburgh, they're literally, you can argue they're 1-2. So I like the pieces in Cleveland. I like what they got going on. I don't believe in Deshaun Watson, especially now at this stage of his career. He's nowhere near the player he was in Houston, and I don't think he's ever going to find that form again.
So I had this was interesting because I did a bracket where I actually had the Browns in second. Now they're my third place team. Okay. I have their record at 12-5 for all the reasons that you don't have them at 12-5. Yeah.
Wow.
Now I have a lot of faith in that defense, and that's 100% why their record is anything over 10. That defense, in my opinion, is the best in the league. and it's shown a lot of times last year how dominant it can be and how many games they can win single-handedly with it.
Yeah.
The injuries are going to be the thing that hold them back. It makes or break this year. And for me, I'm taking a guess that out of belief that they're going to be a relatively healthy team this year on the offensive end. And I do think that Deshaun Watson does still have something in him. And if he plays anywhere close to the level that he played when he was in Houston, this team is a Super Bowl contender, no question about it. Just because all he needs to do is run the offense somewhat well, right?
Yeah.
And then that defense will carry them the rest of the way. But I think that I think this season he will be a serviceable quarterback. I think he'll get the ball into the guy's hands. He's got great options now. And I Chubb, just stay healthy, bro.
Yeah.
Please.
The league needs him.
Oh, dude, this league is so much better when Chubb is playing, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
So yeah, banking on health, banking on situation, and knowing what we know and how I feel about that defense, I think that's going to carry them to a damn good record at 12-5.
No, I love that. That's a great take. I like the aggressiveness you've had, especially with this division in particular. That's pretty interesting. You were more of the in this exercise, you were more on the extreme side of things than I was, which was great. I like that. I was wondering when you had those lower levels, it's like, where are those numbers going to go? I didn't realize they were all going to the AFC North. So this is pretty cool. I like what we did here. So we've both discussed our teams and made our points for why we think our records are going to be what they are. So let's talk about our playoff positioning. So we're only just going to talk about the seeding, where everyone is based off of our record predictions. So let's start with you, Ben. What is your 1 through 7?
All right, 1 through 7 in order.
Yes.
The Ravens are number 1.
Okay.
Then I got the Bills, the Texans, the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Browns, and the Chargers.
Okay. I like that. So then on my side of things, I have the Chiefs as the number 1 seed. Then I have the Ravens, the Jets, the Texans, the Bengals, the Bills, and the Steelers. So those are our playoffs predictions for how we think the playoffs are going to line up this season based off of what we know now and what we inevitably know will not be true. But
I love that.
But this was fun. Like, this is the whole point. Like, we did this last year for our first episode, and we did it for the whole league, and we kind of, rushed it. And now we're probably doing the same amount of time as we did that episode too. But we've come a long way from where we're at, and I'm banking on some of these. But like, that's the thing too. When you look at these betting odds too, I was like, when we were going over the rankings, I was like, some of these don't make sense. But then you were in line with a few of these, and I was in line with a few of these, and like we were off on a couple. It's going to be interesting to see, just because there's still going to be a few changes made. There's still some free agents that can make some difference. There might be a trade or two that we don't know about, like the Matthew Judon. Will he be added to a team like the Ravens or the Lions, or a team that can totally change how the outlook of another team? So this offseason's not done, and we obviously still have holdouts and things like that. Like, teams are still looking to be complete over this next month, but that's the preseason. It's starting. So we're going early before we really know anything else. We're just going off of what we got this offseason. So it'll be interesting to see when we look back just how these end up turning out. So
no, this was a fun exercise. I think that we're going to do this for the NFC, and that's going to be a whole conversation in itself.
We're ready.
I get to light you up and why I think the Eagles missed the playoffs. No, it's fun though to be able to go through all these teams. It gives you a good idea too of like of your opponents, especially like for the Niners and for the Eagles.
Yeah,
we see a lot of these teams throughout the year, and so to be able to kind of dive into these teams and see what we could potentially be looking at in whatever week, like it's good. It's nice little knowledge to have.
Yeah, and it makes the season a little bit more fun. I'm really excited to see what happens. So yeah, like Ben said, we're gonna do NFC next week, same style. We're just gonna We already have our rankings and our records and what we think is going to happen. So, do you have any final thoughts before we head out?
Hot take, Brandon Ayuk signs with the 49ers this week.
I love that. I love that.
That's all.
That's a good hot take. And hey, who knows? There's been a lot of good news coming out of that the Niners camp. That's good. Hearing Brock Purdy throwing a lot of interceptions. That's good news for me. This is what I like to hear.
It's good news for me too, because that means he's putting the ball in harm's way and learning what not to do during the season.
Exactly. Better to do it now.
Keep in mind, he's playing one of the best defenses in the league when he's at training camp. So
that's true. He is going up against a formidable opponent. That's only going to make him better.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it'll be interesting. So NFC is our bread and butter. We're really excited to talk NFC next week. So, but I think that's going to cut it for today. So this was episode 51 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com or hit us up on any of our social medias that we have saved up here. Or if for all you audio listeners out there, we have the links to each of them below, and you can hit us up on any single one of them. We'd love to hear how wrong you think we are, because obviously these are, all 32 teams. That's tough. Like, obviously we're casuals on a few of these teams, but we're probably still going to be right on the majority of these teams. But it'll be interesting to see on the Chargers, for example, how this who ends up on the right side of the coin, because I did not see that one coming. But but no, I'm Marcos Conan. Beside me here, as always, is
Benny the Jet.
All right, y'all. We love you. We're going to talk to you next week. It's going to be a fun episode. Peace.